For over 60 years, scientists and science fiction writers have been using something called the Kardashev Scale to rank civilizations. But I think Kardashev was wrong about a really fundamental thing. Hear me out. Just in case you're confused, I said Kardashev, not Kardashian. The Kardashian scale is for how big your ass is.
I am a god.
And if you're into the Kardashians, I think you're probably watching the wrong video. The idea of the Kardashev scale is simple. A Type 1 civilization uses all the energy available on its planet. A Type 2 civilization uses all the energy of its star. A Type 3 civilization uses all the energy of its galaxy. And at first glance, that sounds perfectly reasonable, right? Obviously, a civilization that can harness the power of an entire galaxy must be more advanced than one that is still arguing about genders and listening to asshats on Spotify. The Kardashev scale is so intuitive that you might never even question it. If some energy consumption is good, more must mean better, right? At least that is the logic I used for spraying on deodorant when I was 15. But the more I thought about it, the Kardashev scale, not the deodorant, the more I thought about it, the more I realized this sounds really familiar. It sounds like, you guessed it, capitalism. And I do know that Nikolai Kardashev was Soviet, but the Soviet Union was obsessed with giant infrastructure projects. So if he could have figured out a way to measure cubic meters of reinforced concrete from across light years, that would probably have been the scale. But still, I mean, what the hell? Was Kardashev a billionaire or something? Because that's how they think. Energy isn't the end goal, it's a means to an end, just like money. And hoarding more energy doesn't make you more advanced or better. No one lays on their deathbed thinking, oh, I wish I'd consumed more kilowatt hours. Let's look at some of the problems. What would a Type 3 civilization actually look like? It would be huge, and with 100,000 light years between you and the home planet, just the sheer distance would isolate the different parts of the society. So much that you wouldn't just be running a 40,000-year-old version of the galactic energy harvesting OS on the same system, we would start to speciate. Evolution keeps running, so pretty fast we'd have like 50 different offshoot branches of Homo sapiens, probably at war with each other. And imagine the spam.
Meet hot singles in your galactic neighborhood.
And what would a Type 2 look like? A Dyson Swarm of trillions of energy harvesters orbiting around the sun sounds pretty awesome. But who's the maintenance guy? Sci-fi stories always talk of an AI superintelligence, but nobody talks about Gary, the guy who has to reboot the Dyson collector on the other side of the sun. See you in 60 years, Gary. And finally, the easiest one to imagine. What would it actually mean to be a Type 1 civilization? Because we are not one yet. Just think about that for a second. If we're using all available energy on Earth, what does that world actually look like? Have we covered every coastline with turbines? Everything else with solar panels and stationary bicycles? Have we dammed every river, drilled every hole? Are we burning all the gas and the coal and the oil? Are we splitting every atom? Is every cow wearing a methane collection butt bag? That doesn't sound like a very nice place to live, if I'm being honest. I think I'd rather live in a mandatory team building retreat. I'm not kidding. I'd rather live my life hopping on a quick call with key stakeholders. Hell, I'd rather be Gary. Where are the humans in this world? Where are we hanging out? Where are we creating art? Where are we keeping our books? Oh, books are paper, and paper is stored energy available on the planet, isn't it? And it does kind of sound like a society that would burn books. And in this society, are we just another resource to be exploited? Like we are now? I don't think a civilization is more advanced if it still sucks to be a part of it. And before you flood the comments with your well actuallys, I know is the equivalent of the solar energy hitting the planet, not literally burning the entire planet for heat. But it's still a weird thing to rate a civilization by. That's like thinking a 1950s black and white TV, you know, the radioactive box the size of a dishwasher with a screen the size of an iPad, is better than a 65-inch LCD flat screen just because it consumes more electricity. You couldn't even imagine Apple announcing a new phone and saying it burns through the battery 5 times as fast. But still, this industrial growth ideology is so ingrained in our thinking that we didn't even notice it in the Kardashev scale. The idea sounds very familiar. Growth is good, more growth is better, bigger is better, higher output is better, more consumption is better. But this isn't LinkedIn, this is the real universe. Those aren't laws of nature, they're values. They are the values of an American corporation. The Kardashev logic is the landlord logic. A type 1 landlord owns a spare apartment, a type 2 landlord owns the building, a type 3 landlord owns every building in Europe. You wouldn't call that a more advanced landlord, you'd call him a problem. The medieval fairy tales had it right. They didn't see a dragon sleeping on a pile of gold and start simping for him like, oh, what a visionary. They sent their best knight to cut his head off. To be fair to Kardashev, the scale was never intended as a blueprint for sci-fi civilizations. It was about what we can detect. If you're looking for aliens, a civilization using the power output of an entire star is easier to notice than one running efficiently. Fair enough. But the most common interpretation of the scale you see in science fiction and YouTube videos explaining the scale assumes that intelligence, knowledge, wisdom, technology, culture, and scientific achievement all naturally correlate with energy consumption, like tie length and gold toilets. But why should they? In human history, some of our biggest technological breakthroughs have really been about doing more with less. Today, a computer fits in your pocket and it outperforms the building-sized ones from just decades ago. And what do they do now? Mine glows and makes a happy little vibration every time someone tells me I suck at making YouTube videos. LEDs produce more light using less energy, and modern car engines get more miles from less fuel. An engineer doesn't look at a car and start thinking of ways to make it go the same distance with more fuel, instead of thinking of ways for it to go further with the same fuel it has. If you do,
you might be a redneck.
So why are we imagining that a truly advanced civilization would eventually cover planets with hamster wheels and wrap stars in scaffolding and plug their galaxy into a giant power bank? Maybe some would. With that much power, they might even run Chrome with 6 tabs open. But that's a very specific vision of the future, and it's not obvious at all that is the inevitable destination of evolution. Evolution doesn't even have goals, it just wants good enough for this environment. It doesn't plan ahead for environments spanning galaxies. This future doesn't even have to be a destination for societal development. In fact, the more advanced a civilization becomes, the less its raw energy consumption would be the most interesting thing about it. We're not metalheads ranking loudspeakers.
These go to 11.
Oh, there's no sound in space. Actually, the energy we might be able to detect from light years away is the waste. It'd be the heat put out by the consumption of the energy. Imagine measuring how advanced a city is by how much literal human shit they dump in the river. The fascinating thing about the Kardashev scale is not that it's useless, even though it looks like it might be, because we haven't really found anyone confirmed by using it as a part of our search for extraterrestrial life. And not even that it's wrong, even though it clearly has some problems. But the interesting thing is that it uses a definition of success that most humans wouldn't even agree with. If you ask an artist or a philosopher or an environmentalist or probably most normal people, what makes a civilization successful? Very few of them would answer, the amount of heat it leaks. Carl Sagan suggested ranking civilization based on how much information they can store. And John D. Barrow suggested ranking civilizations by how small they can go, as in manipulating atoms and elementary particles and even space-time. And they both make more sense in many ways, because knowledge, computation, and precision feel a lot closer to what we usually mean by advancement than a really large electricity bill. And Kardashev might well agree, because he didn't set out to create a cosmic leaderboard. He was just thinking about what we can detect. It was not supposed to be a value judgment. It was supposed to be about finding aliens. But somehow the scale has become one of the most influential ways we imagine our future. If there's one thing human history should have taught us, is that becoming bigger and becoming smarter are not the same thing. Trust me, I spent 20 years working with bouncers at nightclubs. Don't get me wrong, A Dyson Swarm would be insanely powerful. Even an inefficient partial Dyson Swarm could push hundreds of thousands of photon sail ships to near the speed of light. It could power the AI Uber mind to kill us all. It might even get a studio apartment in London to be warm on the inside. I gotta make a whole separate video about Freeman Dyson and what should be called Stapledon spheres. So watch out for that in the future. Anyway, the sphere or swarm itself is a pretty awe-inspiring concept. With that kind of juice, we could do things we can't even imagine today. We might be able to copy 2 large video files to 2 separate external hard drives at the same time, or drive a Volkswagen Jetta up a moderately steep hill. We might even get a politician to answer a yes or no question. Who knows what the possibilities are? But I feel like an actually more advanced civilization would focus on knowledge and culture and science and things we haven't even thought of yet. With much less than the entire output of a star, along with just a few good politicians, a species could live in a post-scarcity civilization pretty quickly. And because it looks like populations cap, anything above that could be used on non-industrial advancement instead of a galactic empire. Because maybe by the time they got to just level 1, they would have figured out that empires, they fall. The future of intelligence can't be an endless race to consume more and more of the universe. Maybe it's learning how to get more meaning out of less. And if that's true, then the silence around us in the universe isn't a mystery or a paradox at all. Maybe advanced civilizations aren't invisible because they're hiding. Maybe they're invisible because they grew the fuck up. And I for one find that future a lot more inspiring than turning the cosmos into a giant power plant. I'm really glad I live in this civilization at a time when there's still art and science and comedy about science. And if you are too, leave a like, maybe a nice comment, because the nasty ones come without me asking. And I would be honored if you subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, a link to my stand-up special is in the description and in the corner card if you're watching on a device that shows those. You can pick it up for just €5 to support me doing this and just living off of comedy, and the people who have seen it seem to have liked it. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.
What happened?